We are live. Totally forgot to press the live button. Hey y'all, me and Jared are back for another episode of Poly Side Eye. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's getting to that point in the semester where I think everyone's kind of starting to run on fumes, myself included. So, but I'm doing well. I can't really complain.
Well, glad to have you here. And I'm not sure if you knew, but this is our 40th episode.
Oh wow, that's so exciting! I still remember when, like, the whole we were just like talking about the idea of even doing it. And yeah, wow, that was like what 3 years ago at least, because I was living in North Carolina at the time. So at least three. So yeah, wow,
Yeah, I was still in my old apartment.
wow.
Yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun, like Janet says.
Right.
Time.
I need time to slow down because the election is coming up. I believe 19 days now. I'm terrified. I know you're fine, but I'm not.
I mean, I can't really help you with that, but I'm just ready for it to be over with.
It drives me crazy how lackadaisical you are. How can you be so calm?
I mean, me being anxious is gonna help do. I mean, somebody's gonna win, somebody's gonna lose. Like me being anxious about it isn't gonna change that. So like, yeah.
Okay. Well, y'all, the topic today, it's been a hot topic discussion that you see on the blogs, especially the black blogs. And I named this episode Kamala Harris and Black Men. Is there a disconnect? Now, when I said this title, I wanted to put straight black men to be a little bit more precise about it. But yeah, it just seems like she's in the final stretch of her candidacy. That's a word, right? Right. Candidacy. And I feel like she's kind of pandering a little bit. And
That's
I'm
what
just
politicians do. They pander.
do, but is it smart? And I'm just wondering what what do black men have like because it feels like they're leaning more so towards a bigger percentage than last time are like maybe voting for Trump. And maybe her campaign sees this, so maybe that's why she's doing this last ditch effort. I'm just wondering, what do you think overall, I guess? And
Uh,
then get into the whole like, what is the disconnect or is there one?
Yeah, so I think first is it's worth maybe taking a step back and being like, okay, so why is this a thing right now? So Kamala's kind of internal polling as well as like mainstream polling. So in NBC, Washington Post, New York Times, they seem to be the polls that is seem to be suggesting that among black male voters, Trump seems to be making inroads. In some cases, some polls have him getting upwards of 15 to 18% of the black male vote, which, if that were to happen, would mark the highest uh, share of the black male vote that any Republican candidate has gotten since like the mid 20th century. I want to say since Eisenhower. So obviously, the Democratic Party has made black voters kind of somewhat of a captured constituency in the sense that they rely very heavily on black, not only black votes, but black turnout to win. I mean, the Democratic Party has gotten, at the presidential level at least, has gotten at least like 85 to 90% of the vote of the so-called black vote since the mid 60s. So, if that drops from, rather if it goes from her getting 5%, I mean, Trump getting 5% of the black male vote in 2020 to him getting even 10 or 11%, that could be decisive enough, especially in states like Pennsylvania, where I am, or Michigan, or some of the other swing states. So they're genuinely concerned about some of the numbers. Now, I am. I I have a somewhat tinfoil hatty thought about polls, which is I think both parties like to keep the polls really close. And I think there's a lot. I don't know this for sure, so this is totally speculation. But I think there is some degree of trying to keep the polls as close as possible because it works to both sides' advantage to keep the race close. If you are on the other side, let's say Kamala looks like she's winning slightly, she can go to her base and be like, okay, don't let off the gas. And so that can be a mobilizing tactic. But conversely, if it shows that she's behind by a couple of percentage points, that can also be a tactic to go to her base and be like, okay, that's why we have to like keep working harder to get over the hump. So I think both parties like to keep it close because it keeps both their constituencies engaged. And so there is some evidence to suggest that Trump is making inroads, and even on his end, I was listening to a really interesting interview recently saying that at this point, Trump is pretty much only targeting um, specifically men, but men of color in these swing states specifically because he thinks he can, in fact, get the job done. So I also, again, I live in Pennsylvania, so I get a lot of these ads. I also get a lot of flyers, mailers rather, mailed to my address. So I see a lot of Trump's, and he is blitzing Pennsylvania, and he's really appealing to a lot of like just economic, stuff about around cost of living. And I mean, there is some like, you know, prejudice is baked into that, but like it is a very economic message. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it worked, to be honest. But yeah, she and her campaign are legitimately concerned that she may not do as well among Black men as possible. But really, what I think is going on, I think there's more of a class dimension here that's not getting caught or captured in the media. So we can maybe talk about that.
Yeah, but I feel like we're seeing this over again, like in the last election, or maybe the election that he won. Like he plays a lot on racism. He plays a lot on a lot of phobias. And I just feel like with this one, is just like, I feel like some men, and since the topic is Black men, I just feel like some straight Black men will just not vote for a woman, no matter how qualified she is for the job. I haven't been in a barbershop in a while, thank God, but I know those conversations. So I just feel like, I don't know, like I think it was just kind of empty to even make that push, because I feel like at this point I feel like who you're voting for. So I just think it's a lost cause at that point.
Yeah, we kind of talked about this the last episode. The both of the major parties have given up on persuasion. In other words, they've given up on actually trying to use reason and to actually hear or make, let's say, rational arguments in favor of their programs, and they all just pretty much depend on vibes and emotion. That's not even me being. I mean, it's pretty open now at this point. So they're not really concerned about persuasion. They're not trying to change anyone's mind. They're trying to mobilize. So the way you mobilize is what's called micro targeting. And so the campaign spent a ton of money like really trying to target people through like YouTube ads and like TikTok and things like that. And you can get really sophisticated now because I mean, pretty much when we use social media, it's just collecting all of our data. So like the things that we Google, the things that we search on the internet, the things we buy, all of that is getting fed back to the campaigns. So you can get very specific about how you target people. And so I think part of it is Trump seems to be doing better with Trump, the Republican Party generally, but Trump in particular does better with men, like just by and large. Like sure, like white men, just much more so than other quote unquote racial groups. But I don't think you can chalk all of that up to like misogyny. Sure, like there are a lot of men who under no circumstance would they vote for a woman irrespective of the policy she advances. But I think really what Trump understands is that there really is a crisis of maleness and masculinity in the country right now that has a lot to do with the economy and the way that our economy has become so much more effeminate. And I don't mean that like disparagingly, but the types of jobs that our economy is producing are just generally not jobs that straight men without like a college degree are gonna do. Like they're not gonna be a home health aide. They're not going to do a lot of those jobs. And so like you have a lot of men that are unemployed, who are disaffected, who are frustrated, who are not having sex. We've talked about this before. Who are not dating. We've talked about this before as well. Who are living at home. And Trump is speaking to them. Now, he doesn't have anything to offer them, obviously. Like, he's going to do that. It's going to be the same policies from the last time, which is he's going to cut taxes for the wealthy, and et cetera, et cetera. But like, he's making his campaign about targeting these people because he believes that he can get enough of them to vote for him such that he can flip some of these swing states. And so I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think he's going to get like 18% in the aggregate, but I think he could very well get enough in some of these keys. Again, you don't, the national polls don't really matter. It's like, can you get enough of the votes in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nevada, et cetera, et cetera?
It's crazy to me. Like, not only did this election really just depend on how 7 states vote, but I just think personally that
It didn't used to be that way, by the way, but
what'd you say?
it used to be that way, but that's where we are now because we, as I've said before, we're so polarized. And so for 40% of people who are like, there's literally, if you vote Democrat, there's literally nothing the Republican Party could say to make you vote for them. And in the opposite side, if you vote Republican, there's literally nothing Democrats could say to make you vote for them. So all of those people are out of the electorate. That didn't used to be the case. You used to have a lot more flip-flopping. So like, New York voted for Reagan twice, and then voted for Clinton, and voted for. But now it's just so polarized to where the whole. I think the blue state, red state thing is really a red herring. I think it distracts us from what's actually happening, in terms of like how people are actually experiencing politics on the ground. But we live in this like national media where people only think about what's going on in the aggregate, and they don't think about the more like localized politics.
Yeah. So also I wanted to point out, how she's, targeting black men. She came out with these policies. And before I just want to get your opinion on some of these policies that she said, I'm worried that when she put this out, I feel like it's going to be like whataboutisms with every other group. So you're going to have like maybe another group be like, oh, well, what about us? Or maybe the gays, what about us? Or I don't know, Latinos, what about us? So it might turn them off that like, oh, okay, you're favoring this group over us. Whereas the Republican Party, like, I've mentioned this a lot of times, they don't really have to do all that. They can just be like, okay, well, we're going to play to the rich, the conservative, and whites. And if you don't fall in that, too bad, too damn bad.
Well, interestingly enough, like again, I get a lot of these mailers, and Trump actually doesn't really say anything about like anybody's quote unquote identity. Like his mailers are like, cost of living has gone up, your wages are, adjusted for inflation are less than they were 4 years ago. All of these things which are true, and he's just hammering now. The actual policies, we know the reality. He's not going to actually like do anything to improve people's material plight, but he's at least saying something that is not a message that's tailored to like specific like subsets of the population. That's kind of that's kind of the other side of identity politics. When you break up the population in this way, you're going to get this kind of like, people think of politics as being a zero-sum game. Like, oh, well, if black people get this, it's going to come at my expense, which that's why I'm always like saying, if you really wanted to like, generate some type of like movement that could change politics, you should be espousing a more universalist program that doesn't try to like, tease apart the population in that way. But that's not going to work because we've been so conditioned to think of politics as having to necessarily be competitive, as having to necessarily be zero sum. And we also don't really have a language to discuss class. So like the way that we think about that competition is through the lens of race, which all of that is done, it's not natural. We're all like socialized through media, through the way that we understand race and racial politics, like all of that, like structures the way that we think about politics. And so that's the Democratic Party's MO. So like, yeah, to your point, like she might, get some more, black male votes if she, gets enough people to buy into this like platform she proposed, which I thought was interesting. But to your point, there's another side of that, which is like it might actually cost you votes from people who may have otherwise been sympathetic to you because you're not speaking directly to them, which again, like everybody, if you look at most polls, which is this is another thing I know that political strategists are like not serious about persuading people and actually like growing bases. They're just trying to jockey over like existing voters. Is because if you look at every major poll, so I saw in Pew Research had a poll they conducted asking people to name like the most important issues to them. Literally everybody, it didn't matter what your race was, didn't matter your class, but it literally everybody was like the economy and inflation. Like that's the two things that matter the most to them. And literally neither one of the parties are really talking about what they're gonna do to like adjust I mean Kamala has kind of said, oh, I'm gonna like price fix and stuff. And I'm like, that's A, that's not going to happen. And B, like, that's not even a good solution. So both of them are just kind of like skirting around the issue. And so I don't really know, what people think, what the campaign thinks this like opportunity for Black men program is going to do.
Right.
Interesting policies too. I understand why she proposes them,
Yeah.
but
Well, the policies for inflation or the policies like she just came up with, like in regards for an agenda for Black men.
that one, I understand why. So people on Twitter were like, oh, like this is, some of the critics of Kamala were like, "Oh, this isn't actually like addressing like." I'm just like, okay, but you have to like take a step back and really think about who is it that she's trying to target. She's trying to target not just Black men. She's trying to target a very specific, a specific subset of Black men. In particular, she's trying to address Black men who don't have a college education,
Yeah.
uh, and who don't work in like what I call like thinking jobs. So like people who usually have to do some form of physical labor. These are people who are generally fans of what they're not say fans, but like their idea of like freedom or their idea of like the way the world should be is what is like a Republican form of freedom. And by that, I don't mean like Republican Grand Old Party, GOP Republican.
Well, I'm reading between the lines of what you're saying, and I agree.
Well, yeah, it's just kind of like I want to be a small business, to own a business, because in America, people generally think the only way you can be free is by like owning your own business. Because I mean, it's not like people really want to own a business per se. It's just they don't want a boss and they don't want to be told what to do. So like, and that's a very powerful ideology in the U.S. And so I think part of her like push for like Black entrepreneurship and like that type of thing is because she knows that among people of a certain class, especially, that ideal of like being your own boss is really, really, really powerful because these are the people who usually work the shittiest jobs in the economy. And so they're tired of like dealing with their boss's bullshit and stuff. And so if it sounds good to be like, yes, I'm gonna have my own business. Yes, I'm gonna be my own boss. And so I think part of her plan is like addressing that kind of like specific kind of idea of freedom.
So I'm going to go to the audience right quick because we love participation. Feel free to weigh in on this topic as well. Let's see. Momi says, since Obama's second term, Black turnout has reduced between men and women, so they should have been paying attention to this back then in every election since.
Yeah, so to that point, I think that's a really, really good observation. So I think again, part of it is it's a class element. So like the question is like which Black people have been like voting less, and typically it's been again not middle class Black people, not Black people with college degrees. Our economy is becoming really polarized between people with college degrees and people without. That's the biggest cleavage in politics now. So the Democratic Party is increasingly becoming a party of college educated people who live in cities, cosmopolitan folks. Whereas the Republican Party is increasingly becoming, it's weird because both parties have wealthy people, but like different types of wealthy people. So like for Republicans, it's usually like wealthy people who work for like the oil industry and stuff like that. Whereas the Democratic Party represents like wealthy people on Wall Street and Silicon Valley. So like they both respond to the wealthy. Like that's their main constituency. And most political science research shows like there's pretty much no correlation between what non-rich people want and what they actually get. So like both parties really only respond to their donors, which makes sense because we have an election where the Supreme Court says that, you know, that money is a form of free speech. And so like you can't, you know, essentially you can donate whatever you want and then people respond based on that. But also like the Democratic Party again has become much more like cosmopolitan and elite in the sense that more people who are a Democrat have college degrees, and that split is really starting to take a toll on both parties. And so like a lot of the lower turnouts, this is why the Republican Party really like tries to lean on racism real heavy because they have such a large working class base, and because the working class has generally been less likely to vote relative to people in the middle class or like more affluent, which has been true since Reconstruction. But because that's the case, and because they're not going to actually offer any policies that improve, you know, their lives economically, they just offer like, you know, the racist stuff, the anti-trans, the cultural wars. Like that's why we have that, because in both parties, again, they accepted in the 80s that they both were just going to fight politics in the realm of culture, because they were both like, well, if we're both just going to like support the wealthy, like we can't really run on that. So like, let's both agree to like just not talk about like monetary policy or not talk about any of that stuff, and we'll just like fight over abortion and gay stuff and like that type of stuff, because there's never going to be a solution to it because it's not a concrete policy. It's just pretty much your worldview, and you can't win. You can't how do you resolve that? You can't resolve a worldview. So like it's just interminable. And politically, it actually is really smart in a lot of respects, but yeah.
Blood Honey says, I understand Black people not wanting to vote Democrat. I don't understand using sexist / right-wing misinformation as their rationale.
For not wanting to vote, can you give me an example of the like sexist right-wing misinformation? I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but like yeah, what's a concrete example of that?
Right. I found it interesting that Kamala's policy for Black men didn't include expungements for nonviolent crimes. Most of these Black men have felonies that cripple their upward mobility.
Yeah, I mean, well, Kamala's an institutionalist. Like she's not gonna like, I mean, she's a cop by her own admission, so like she's not gonna do that. Like that's way too. And Kamala's also moved to the center. I was reading an article in the Financial Times the other day saying that pretty much Wall Street was like, look, if you don't like move to the center and stop like talking like you hate us, like we're gonna stop donating to your campaign. So it's like she agreed to move to the center and support Wall Street, so she could get more campaign donors to fund her campaign. So that was in the Financial Times, if anyone's interested.
It's an interesting question. How do you build more class consciousness amongst Black people?
What do you mean by class consciousness specifically? Do you mean like getting more Black people to know that that what neither one of the parties care about that? Like I don't, yeah, what specifically? Yeah.
Gotcha. I mean, I took it as like, just how do you make people like just have more awareness of that?
Well, I mean, I think people know. Like people know that the economy is rigged. Like they're not stupid. It's just that I mean,
He does this a lot. When me and him are arguing over text message, he does this a lot, but he needs clarity. Like,
yeah, I just don't want to like. I mean, these are big questions, and so like I do this to my students too. So like, don't feel like. So to the point about the class consciousness thing, I think people know at some, maybe not to the degree that they know enough to like significantly change their behavior, but I think most people know that most people know that the wealthy run everything and that you have to throw yourself into this hamster wheel to survive. Like most people know that. I think the bigger issue is that, and this is why I'm always trying to like talk from a left perspective and from a socialist perspective. I'm always trying to tell people like it doesn't have to be this way, and like people have fought repeatedly in the past to not let it be this way. And so like it's our task as working people to like figure out a way to like convince enough people to believe that it doesn't, not A, that it doesn't have to be this way, and B, that there is actually um there's a reason, or like there's a purpose behind like trying to like break out of the status quo. And so I think it's less about people not being conscious. I think people kind of take a more fatalistic view, kind of like, oh, well, this is just the way it is. And so like, if this is just the way it is, well, I guess I just need to secure the bag and like try to figure it out. Which is, I guess, a reasonable decision given the set of conditions that people face. But yeah, I don't think it's less. I think people may not know the degree to which the corruption and the pillaging exists. You know it exists.
If they knew or understood better, why are they still buying into the American dream or this cryptocurrency foolishness?
I mean, knowing, but I have a line in one of my recent papers where I'm saying, or I say knowing better doesn't necessarily mean doing better. And I mean, we all are fall prey to that. I mean, most of us know that like using straw, like plastic straws, is terrible for the environment. But I fucking hate a paper straw, and if it's gonna be between using a paper straw and a plastic straw, it's gonna be like fuck them turtles. I'm using the plastic straw. So like I know better. I know from my own actions that like doing this thing is bad in the totality, but I still do it. And so like what I'm saying is like being conscious is not necessarily enough to like change behavior. We're all conscious of a lot of things and still do otherwise, not because we're like hypocritical or inconsistent or anything like that. It's just we are all like behaving and responding to a set of incentives that we all faced. And for a lot of people, the main thing that they're trying to do is just survive to make it to another day. And I think things like crypto, it sells people dreams. Like part of the reason that, for instance, gambling and like the lottery are so popular in this country, and there's so many sociological resources, I mean research, sociological so a lot of sociological research and books and things have been written about this, is that people oftentimes know that gambling or like playing the lottery is like their chances of winning are slim to none, but they feel like given everything else they face, like they'd rather just like take a chance and like hope that that can improve their situation, because they know that given all of the other options they have, like they don't really have many things at their disposal. So like again, I don't think just knowing is enough. Like people have to know, and they have to believe that they can actually change their conditions. Yeah, so I think it has to be both of them.
Gotcha. Now, Andre Henderson, I was going to touch on this a little bit later, but we could just jump right into it. Like, when did Buckethead ass Charlemagne become the voice of the culture? His effing voice was used in a Trump ad. I hate that MF. And basically, what I was going to bring up is it's just crazy to me. Well, in my opinion, that like Charlemagne just become like the voice of like the black community, the voice of I guess straight black men. And it's also crazy to me, like in within this line, like how the Shade Room, like they got an interview with Kamala Harris. I could not believe that, the Shade Room. I mean, I know you're not into like the pop culture thing, but just what do you think of these platforms like getting all the way to like the White House? Is it just because of their reach to who they're trying to get to vote for them?
Yeah, I mean, who else would they talk to? I mean, it's not like we have a very robust black intellectual class, whereas that was the case in like, I study black political thought, so like I read a lot of material from the mid 20th century, where I would argue that that's really where you had the most robust kind of like black intellectual class. I mean, if you read Stokely Carmichael's work, or if you even read King's work, or you read James Baldwin, like these people were intellectuals. Like they understood political economy, they understood philosophy, they understood history, they understood social conditions, they understood politics not just as a temporary thing, but within a longer trajectory. So they understood all of that. We're a dumb society now. It's not our fault, but we are. We're just a dumb society because, and that's the reason I say it's not our fault per se, is because part of what automation has done, part of what technological advancement has done, is essentially created the conditions where thinking really is not necessary. I mean, think about how many things we do, or how many types of technology we use to essentially not allow us to have to think. I mean, that's what AI is all about. Like I go on Google and like I type a question and just like AI is already like giving me everything I need to know. Like I don't have to think about it. And so I mean, that's kind of where we are as a society. So we've become an anti-intellectual, unthinking, dumb society. And we're also just really overstimulated. Again, it's not our fault because most of us, our the mental capacity we do have is usually exhausted by work. So like capitalism sucks our mental capacity, so we can't concentrate, we can't think critically. Our culture is also very much. I kind of talked about this book last time. I think it's called Fear Inc. Maybe, but essentially the argument is that cable news, especially, but increasingly like social media, is designed to make us hate Inc. I think it's called, to make us hate each other. And you can't really have productive politics where everybody is distrustful of each other and hates the other. Toni Morrison talks about this in The Origins of the Other, which is a really great book. She talks about how otherizing people is just like one of the most reactionary things you could possibly. And we do it all the time. Like we take statistics. So we see a report about what some group of people, or black men, white men, whatever, and then we just generalize about all of them. So we see somebody in the street and we, sneer at them, or we are suspicious of them, and all of that makes for a politics that is really not conducive to having a show or some type of program that can, critically engage their audience. So we end up with people like Charlemagne because he's not very. I mean, I don't feel comfortable saying this, so I'm not going to say he's not very smart. Let's say he's not much of an.
I feel comfortable saying.
I don't like calling people not smart or stupid or anything like that, but he's definitely not an intellectual. But neither is his audience, and so like, if that's who you're trying to reach, then why wouldn't you go to him?
I love a classy drag. I mean, hey, yeah. Did you watch it at all? Did you watch that interview?
No. Okay, so wait, can we go back to Blood Honey's comment, because this is really important.
Which
So
one?
about the agency.
Agency.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. But where is the agency and who designed that media, Jared? It doesn't happen in a vacuum.
So we don't. So that's the thing. It's not just the design. That's kind of the beauty of destruction. But if you're Google, this is the beauty of AI, is because you don't. A lot of they've relied they're relying so heavily on machine learning now, to where a lot of these algorithms are so complex that they don't actually know why you're seeing what you're seeing. Like, in other words, like, it's not like there are people sitting in a room and like doing this. Like, everything has gotten so automated. So part of it is the social media is only feeding back to us what we tell it we want to see. So like, if we want to see dumb shit and whatever, that's what's going to feed back to us. So like, part of it is our agency is like, how our own consumption habits. So like, for example, this is not really related, but I think related to the point I'm trying to make. So I saw somebody tweet yesterday that they wanted to bring back like the era of the celebrity, like when people actually were like, real celebrities, where we were like, ooh, like Michael Jackson, like,
I saw that.
yeah. And so like, I quote tweeted and I was like, well, that's not gonna happen, because like, we don't live in a society where people want that kind of distance. And for a host of reasons, I think part of the reason we have these growing like parasocial relations. We talked about this last episode, how people just get so obsessed with celebrities and wanting to hear all of their thoughts and their every movement and so forth, is because we're increasingly lonely as a society. And so like, we develop more of these relationships through these kind of like parasocial connections. And so the guy that tweeted that responded to me and was like, well, like, what should we do about it? And I was like, well, really, it kind of starts with us. Like, part of the reason that celebrity culture has become what it is because it's what's called a feedback loop. So like, we're kind of feeding these algorithms our behaviors, and then the product is just feeding back to us the things that that the data that's being collected from us. And so like, I think the agency is like us deciding like, hey, like maybe we shouldn't be, you know, watching this thing or doing this thing, but easier said than done, because a lot of it is part of what makes social media so powerful is that Google goes out and they hire PhDs in psychology to like implement these different theories and things and manipulate us cognitively. So it's a push and pull, what you know philosophers might call a dialectic. So we do have agency. It's just that we have to think about what we do within like the broader political economy.
So just going back to her plans, I just quickly, because there's just five of them. I just wanted your thoughts on it. So she said, for Black men, providing 1 million loans that are fully forgivable to Black entrepreneurs and others to start a business.
Do I think it's a good policy?
Yeah, like what did you think of it just reading it?
I mean, from a policy standpoint, it's terrible because you're pretty essentially gonna what so Wall Street so BlackRock pretty much wrote her economic policy. And Wall Street loves this because it would be funded through the banks, which means the banks would essentially get to profit off of these like government loans essentially. And so from that standpoint, it's terrible. From a rhetorical standpoint, I do think that that is something that could be appealing to certain Black men, like I said before, who don't have a college degree and who aspire to entrepreneurship, not necessarily because they want to be business owners, but because they don't want to be under their boss's control. And that's I think we underestimate how much we hate wage labor. I've been reading a lot of literature from the 19th century because that's what we've been discussing in my Black Thought class, and people forget that wage labor was called wage slavery for a bit, in the sense that people who had to sell their labor in exchange for a wage was like, okay, this is only slightly better than slavery in the sense that it's not for life, but it's not viewed as freedom. I mean, even Abraham Lincoln was like, wage labor is like not freedom. And so there's always been this kind of disdain towards wage labor that politicians have always exploited. And so I think part of what she's doing is she's like tapping into this disenchantment that people have working shitty jobs under bosses who are like, domineering. And so from that standpoint, it makes sense politically, but the policy is not good.
Right. Number two, championing education, training, and mentorship programs that help Black men get good paying jobs in high demand industries and lead their communities, including pathways to become teachers.
That's too vague to really. It sounds okay, but like it's very vague, and so like I don't really in a.
Supporting a regulatory framework for cryptocurrency and other digital assets so Black men who invest in and own these assets are protected.
Crypto is a scam, so absolutely not. I mean, scam is probably not fair. Like
Pyramid scheme?
crypto again, this isn't new. Like so part of the question about like money has been an ongoing thing, what's called like a fiat currency. So like there's always been a movement, not always, but like for quite some time in the US, there's always been this question of like who gets to control the money supply. The idea being like, the Federal Reserve and the Treasury, they're undemocratic. Like we don't have any say over that. And so there's always been this kind of like desire to like have a different currency or a different way of making money outside of the dollar fiat currency. But it's always it's not backed by anything, or it's not grounded in it's not grounded in social relations, so it's always going to be a bubble that they always end up in a bubble. And so like I understand why people might be interested in that. Again, desperation. People are just looking for something to like improve their position, but like it's really going to just hurt the people at the bottom the most, because if that when the bubble bursts, like who do you think is going to be left holding the can? So I understand why people are drawn to it. I wish that they weren't, but I understand why they are.
Right. The last two is more so like, I I didn't see anything wrong with these. Launching a national health equity initiative focused on Black men that addresses sickle cell disease, diabetes, mental health, prostate cancer, and other health challenges that disproportionately impact them.
NA.
Okay. And number five, which had some pushback a little bit,
Oh, let
legalizing.
me go back to the last thing. Okay,
Uh,
sure, but like the issue is the healthcare system. Like that's just such a small. Like, why are we even discussing like universal healthcare anymore? At one point, Kamala said she was for Medicare for all. I remember in 2020. She said that she was for Medicare for all, and then when she got criticized for it, she said she was for Medicare for all who wants it, which makes absolutely no sense. And I was just like, so people are just not going to push her on this. But like to me, it seems like she's saying this because she's gotten people in big pharma and like the medical industry, if essentially the insurance industry, are whispering her in her ear, being like, "Don't you dare mention anything about no fucking Medicare for all." And so like this is like her way of like addressing healthcare without saying the thing that people really want to hear, which is that they want to hear something about how can you make healthcare more affordable. But she can't say that because her donors are telling her not to. And she's openly, again, I'm not being conspiratorial. You can go to the Financial Times. There was a whole article in earlier this week or maybe late last week saying like Kamala has been especially responsive to her big donors, and they've been very instrumental in crafting a lot of her policies too. And so that's my reading of that.
right.
I mean, it's not just Kamala. I mean, Trump is also like does the same thing. I mean, it's not a Kamala thing. It's a democratic. It's a institutional, systematic thing.
But I feel like he doesn't even have to worry about that. Like the problem is like we need to beat Trump. Like because it's starting to look like it's just like right here. Hopefully I'm wrong, but it just seems that way. It seems like she has to work a little bit harder than he does. And it just
Who is we? You said we need to beat Trump. Who is we?
Democrats, because I'm a Democrat. I am against Trump. I want Kamala to be in office. I'm just saying, like,
Oh, okay. I'm not a Democrat, so I didn't want you to include me in that we.
Right, exactly. Fine.
Beat Trump. Okay.
I just want her ass in the door, and then people can like express concern or whatever. I just don't feel like this country as a whole will survive another 4 years under Trump. But anyway, number five.
No one knows that.
Well, I know it. I feel like it's going to happen.
Well, you literally cannot know it because it's in the future. So you literally cannot know it. You can assume it, you can predict it, but you cannot know it. Like
I'm clairvoyant, damn it. Okay. Legalizing recreational marijuana and creating opportunities for Black Americans to succeed in this new industry. Now, I didn't understand why some people were offended by this because I feel like most people that were locked up for like marijuana or distributing it was Black people. So why would that be on there?
Maybe disproportionately, but not most.
Okay, fine,
yeah.
Fair. But yeah, that
indifferent. I mean, sure. Like I'm not anti those things, but to me that in the grand scheme of things that's going on both domestically and geopolitically, this doesn't even come close to scratching the surface of the things that we need to discuss in this country. Again, I don't expect
you're right.
Either one. So I was just kind of like whatever. Like it's not for I'm not the intended audience. So like I don't care.
Okay. So the next topic that I want to do, this might have to be our last one. I have like my Mr. Burns fingers.
Is this the Obama thing?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Like, can we please? Because I haven't tagged Barack Obama in a while, and I'm overdue. So like, I've been waiting for this week.
Now, let me just post this disclaimer, y'all. Whatever Jared says, that is his opinion. Y'all can like blow up his inbox, not mine. So yeah.
Let me sit up straight, make sure I get a swig of water.
So yeah, Barack Obama, like I think he just said some controversial things, I guess. He was just talking to Black men directly. I personally feel like it was a conversation that just needed to be brought up, and no one was talking about it. And I felt like, some people just needed that shoulder shake, like wake up. I can't say the N word, unfortunately, on here, but it's just like, it just felt like it just felt like a much needed wake up call. Just be like, really, y'all? Like, you really gonna cut off your nose to spite your face and vote for Trump?
Well, I actually think it's had the inverse result, because most of the reception I've seen to it is like Obama is patronizing, he's condescending, he's talking down to people, all of which he's doing, by the way, all of which he has been doing his whole career. Obama's whole shtick has been, I'm just gonna talk down to y'all black folks, and just like make a career out
So,
of it. We all ate it up. He literally told in 2008, he literally told an auditorium full of black people that they need to stop feeding their kids cold Popeye's chicken for breakfast. Like,
I
we
mean,
just let that slide. We just let that slide. So like Obama has had a long history of being patronizing to black men. Now, here's the thing. If you accept the premise, which I don't, but if you accept the premise that black men should, for some reason, without having to explain why, that they should vote for Kamala Harris, it's incumbent upon you to like lay out a rational argument as to why that's so. Maybe he could have taken this approach and said, well, let's go through each of the policies that both of these candidates are espousing. And based on these policies, like it seems to me like you would probably benefit most from Kamala's policies. But no, that's not what he does. What he decided to do, he comes in here in his high horse, puts on his black scent, which he always does, wags his finger at these people in the room, which by the way, like the people he was really talking to weren't even in the room. So like,
fair,
let's talk about that.
fair.
So the purpose of that performance, which is, I mean, Obama is a performer. Like that's what he. I mean, it's not just Obama. Like politicians are professional performers. That's all they do. But Obama has been like particularly adept at like really trying to like play up his black bona fides. Um, and I think in a lot of ways it's run its course. I don't think Obama has the same mystique and power that he used to, especially among like working class black people. And the reason, let me tell you why I say that. So when I lived in New York, I used to do a lot of canvassing when I worked with the Urban League. And I used to canvas, so like voter registration canvassing. I used to canvass in Crown Heights, which is, if people don't know, that's a neighborhood in Brooklyn, predominantly black. It's been gentrifying some over the last like decade or so, but like still heavily black. And also in Central Harlem, which is also predominantly black. And in 2012, when I did a lot of canvassing for that election, so many black people came up to me, and these are also relatively like poor neighborhoods. I think if I remember right, the median income for a family of four in the neighborhood I used to canvass in Brooklyn was like $36,000 for a family of four. So it's a pretty poor neighborhood. Um, a lot of them were like, things are worse for me now in 2012 than they were in 2008. So we've had 4 years of a black president, and I was doing better, 2006, 2005 than I am now. And Obama said he was gonna do this, and promised all these things, never delivered. And so like I'm just like, I'm just kind of not interested in it. Like it doesn't affect me. And I realized like I didn't really have much of a rejoinder to that, aside from, well, it could always be worse, which I think is a terrible way to try to mobilize people. And I think that trying to guilt people or to shame people into voting is not the strategy you should take at this point. Like if you really want to like convince people that the electoral process is something that they can materially benefit from, it's incumbent upon you to like lay out an argument and convince them and listen to their concerns. Like, don't just be dismissive of it. It just reeked of like, it's just so like
I know.
condescending and also anti-black, but
Right.
condescending.
Now, can we get on that right quick? Because I know you like to point out Obama's anti-blackness, and just can you explain that to somebody like because I talk to you all the time, but hearing that from somebody who probably loves Obama, they'll probably be like, "What are you talking about?" So why do you think that? And please lay it out,
I mean,
please.
he relies so heavily on like black stereotypes and tropes to like craft his political image. Again, the fried chicken thing was like particularly egregious, and that's not the only time he did that. I also, in 2008 especially, like so much of his speeches were around essentially the same trope about oh, the reason that black people are not where they are in the society is because, we don't have fathers in the house, and, they just need to be more responsible and, like, lift them, essentially, like, bootstrap ideology. Like, that's been his thing. I mean, the thing that with Obama is that he has a very conservative ideology. It's a very Booker T. Washington ideology. This idea that the problem with black people is black people. And so, like, we got to get our house, and not capitalism, not like the lack of good paying jobs, not the fact that health insurance has gone up like 300% in like 2 or 3 decades. None of that. That's not why black people are like in their position. It's because, we don't want to support our black women, and we don't, we're misogynistic, and like we just need to pull ourselves up, and like we need to work in our home. Like, it's a very conservative Booker T. Washington type ideology. Obama just packages it in cool, in the sense that he's like, oh, I'm gonna say all this stuff, but I'm gonna play basketball and like post my Spotify, year-end favorite songs shit, and like to make people think I'm like the cool president. But behind the scenes, like, he is pretty much just as economically conservative as pretty much most of the people in the Democratic Party. He's not like he always had this like progressive kind of aura about himself. And I'm like, there's nothing progressive about Barack Obama.
Looking back at it,
There's definitely nothing leftist about Barack Obama. He was very much an opportunist. We know from WikiLeaks that Citibank pretty much chose his entire cabinet and his whole like economic platform for his first term, which was directly in opposition to what black people needed. Yeah, we just all give him a pass for that because he plays basketball and sings sometimes. It's just very like I just want people to like, there's nothing wrong with being critical. Like, we should all be
I
critical.
agree with that.
None of us should like take anything at just face value. That's not to say what's at face value isn't legitimate. I'm just saying you shouldn't accept it. And you definitely shouldn't accept it from a fucking politician. So like and Obama's not exceptional. Like, he does the same thing that Bill Clinton does, and all these other people did. He's just really good at it, and that's to me what makes him so dangerous, because he's good at it. He's good at convincing black people that he actually is on their side, when in fact he's supporting policies that are gonna like directly up in black people's material position. So I'm done. That's my. If
Right.
everybody knows, all my cards about Obama are on the table.
Right. Release your foot off of Obama's neck just for a second.
No, he needs to catch one more stray. No, I'm playing. I'm playing.
Okay. I will say, well, let me read Momi's comment. The shine has worn off from Obama because black folks aren't in a better position since he was elected in his first term. That's why there's been a reduction in voter turnout. I do think, like, because I used to love Barack Obama, but like when you really actually like talking to you, it really did make me think, like, you know what? Like, he had a completely like blue, like everything, I think. And I felt like he could have really, really got some shit done, And like, look what
Citibank
Donald
said
Trump did.
no.
Huh?
Citibank said no. Citibank said no. We know I'm not we all did y'all read did people read WikiLeaks? Like, there's literally evidence which shows that Obama's first term, in terms of like most of his economic policies, were pretty much all entirely decided by Citibank and Wall Street. So like, anything that if they weren't going to sign off on it, he wasn't going to do it. Now the thing with Obama is that he won based on this huge like kind of like grassroots kind of campaign, or seemingly grassroots campaign. I mean, he still got a lot of corporate funding, but that was kind of the image that he gave. So he had to like square that circle some kind of way. And so like part of the way he did that was like, oh, I'm trying so hard, but they won't let me do that. But behind the scenes, and again, we know this from WikiLeaks, behind the scenes, like Citibank was pretty much writing the policy, but they're just like, okay, you gotta give these great speeches that you're really great at doing. And you can convince the people that you tried your hardest because you're so good at doing that. Meanwhile, we're just gonna write all of these bills, all these policies, and like do the real work. And so like, again, that's what politicians do. Like, it's not a Obama thing. I don't hate Obama. Like, I'm sure he's a great father, a great husband. I'm sure that his kids love him, all those things. I don't know the man, don't really care to know the man. But based on his actual, like, all I can go based on is the policies that were passed or weren't passed under his clock. And By that measure, I would venture to say that unless you are a black person in maybe the top 10 to 15% of earners in this country, you probably did not benefit from his policies. And to answer somebody else's questions, no, you wouldn't have benefited from Republican Party's policies
Yeah.
either. That's the point. You're not going to benefit from either one, which is why people should go listen to my Why We Should Fight for Socialism video.
Okay. That was the next question I was going to ask. Like, what have Republicans done for Black Americans? So yeah, thank you for answering that. Yeah, I think you were the one that pulled the rose-colored glasses for Obama off my face, and I was just like, damn, like you got a point, you got a point. So, but I don't dislike Obama. I mean, but
you don't know him. You don't have to like or dislike him.
I know.
Wait, can we pull up this last comment because I think this is an important point. LA Lover 323, he killed Gaddafi.
Oh, let's not do too much.
So this is
the channel. Like, just watch.
I won't say anything crazy, but all I'm going to say is the Democratic Party has essentially become the Republican Party of the George Bush presidency in the sense that they have become much more aggressive in terms of like war making than the Republican. They've essentially become the Republican Party from George. That's why Dick Cheney and all the people are going to be like, oh, we're just supporting Kamala to like save democracy. They don't give a shit about democracy. The reason they're getting behind Kamala is because the Democratic Party has become the party of the neoconservatives. They've become the party of we're just going to keep starting wars all over the world because that's what America does because we're imperialist. And so that is a development that I feel like the K-Hive does not talk enough about, which is how should we feel about the Democratic Party becoming more imperialist than the Republican Party? Because this is happening. And it is, again, this isn't even just conjecture. If you go read Foreign Policy magazine, they're all talking about how now the Democratic Party is the war party. Like even conservatives are admitting that now. So like, what do we do with that? So I'm not saying there's an easy answer to it, but I think that's something we should also wrestle with.
Okay. And then I do remember this, but people keep forgetting that we didn't show up for 2010 midterms like we did in 2008. We lost the House and the Senate. And that's my point was at one point we did have the House and the Senate. And just I feel like ever since 2010, like Republicans really like took advantage of that. And that's what made me mad about Democrats. It's just like when we really have the ball in our court, what do we do with it? You know, but like we score maybe 2 points, but then when the Republicans have the ball in their court, they score like maybe 80 points. You know, like getting 3 Supreme Court justices in your term, that is insane to me. And now we're paying for that.
I mean, the Democrat, well, the Mitch McConnell, I can't really speak much to the Mitch McConnell thing. Like that was a, I mean, when he like completely blocked the Merrick Garland from getting appointed, I was like, oh, bitch, this bitch is like, he doesn't give a shit. So like, I actually had to give him his credit because that was, and the fact that he got away with it, like there's 330 whatever million people in this country, and we just all sat back and let it happen. None of us lifted the finger and stopped it. So like you have to give him his credit. Like you have to give him some props.
Fuck Mitch McConnell, okay? Like
there's
one person.
I hate his politics, but like that is some bullshit. Like it really is.
If there's one person who I just wish nothing, like, but just like evil for it is for that man. Like, God, I can't wait to like pop open a nice bottle of champagne when it happens.
Yeah. Like, so let me respond to Blood Honey's point about the Republicans and why do. So I critique you, as you know, Chris. I critique both sides. Like I don't even. To me, like there's no point in critiquing the. I mean, what is there to critique in the Republican Party? Like they're first off, they're not even a party at this point. They're like I don't even know. Neither one of them are really parties in like the literal sense of the term, or at least the more like historical sense of the term. But both of them need to be critiqued like equally, honestly. It's not even like a lesser of two evils thing or any of that, because I think that's a stupid setup. Like it's what does that do for you? Like all of us should be critical of anybody who steps foot in any position of power, irrespective of what letter they have next to their name. And like none of us should fall into the trap in being partisan about these things. because neither of these parties care about you. Like the gag is the Republican Party will tell these white men that they care about them. They do not. The Democratic Party will tell working people they care about them. They do not. And so, like, we need to collectively think outside of this arrangement. I know we don't have imaginations. We don't learn. We don't think that anything is possible. We think that it's all, lost and hopeless. But we have to allow ourselves to stop thinking that way, because the only way we'll ever get out of this like Groundhog Day scenario is if we take seriously like politics that are outside of what we have become acclimated to. And that's why I critique both sides. Now, I might talk about Democrats more here because a lot of our questions are oriented around Democrats, and also they're the party in power. So, like, they're the ones who, are usually in the news and stuff in terms of like the policies and things that they are or aren't supporting. But like, I think both parties should be critiqued in like relentlessly.
Right. Well, we have reached our 1 hour point. We're gonna put a pin in it there. Thank y'all for y'all's participation, as well as y'all's passion in the comments. And again, Jared is a professor. Like, I love how he brings like just, he brings nuance to the situation. Like, like I think you make us think outside of the box and bring up scenarios that really need to be focused on that people don't really look at. So, before you critique, really look at it with an open mind. That's just my way of people not, flaming you or whatever. But yeah.
Yeah. Also, if you want to drag me in the comments, I feel like that's good for our impressions and things. So like, that's fine too. But
yeah.
but yeah, like if you just, I'm like, I don't feel like my task is to like get people riled up. Like if you want to get riled up, you can go watch MSNBC or CNN. Like that's not my what I'm here for. What I'm here for, or what I try to do, is like throw nuggets on the table and allow people to pick them up if they find something interesting. If you found everything I said to be complete bullshit, that's fine too. Like I promise I will not be offended.
Right. Well, y'all, if you want to follow Jared, his @ is JC Tiger Fan, JayCtigerFan. You can follow me on, all platforms, but make sure you like, the video. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. We have 19 days until the election.
And it can't get soon enough.
Right. I feel like we need to do an episode the day after the election. I'm not sure. I'm not even sure if I'm going to be ready to do that, but we'll see.
The votes won't be counted by then, though. It's probably going to take a while for the votes to be counted because the election's going to be so close. So I doubt very seriously we'll know on election night who won. I would be shocked.
Yeah, I just remember going to The View the day after because I was just like, we're going to get a Hillary win. And I'm on The View. We're going to be celebrating. And it did not go the way I thought it was. And it was one of the most depressing days I can remember having as an adult. Anyway, hopefully we can come back and have another conversation before the election. Where can we find Jared's videos? Jared does not have a YouTube. He just has opinions on Twitter, which are, great to read. So he's on Twitter and he's on Instagram if you want, book recommendations and thirst traps, basically.
Exactly.
But yes, y'all, thank y'all for watching, and we'll be back soon. So make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you later. Bye.